Hello, and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and today I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Judith Starr. She is one of my co-chairs for the American Bar Association's section of Dispute Resolution Mediation Committee. Our other co-chair is Ed McDevitt. One little plug for our Mediation Committee, which is one of the largest committees in the dispute resolution section. We have a monthly Zoom meeting every month on the second Wednesday at 12 noon, and anyone can join. So if you're interested, just reach out to me, to Judith, or go to the ABA section of dispute resolutions page and sign up for the Mediation Committee Connect. So you'll have the notices. But Judith, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to be talking about your practical tips for mediators.
Thank you. It's really good to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. So we talk every month because you have really adapted to moving to the Zoom platform and doing mediations. Just to give everybody a little background on Judith, because I think she's always too modest to talk about it. But Judith has a long and storied career with the federal government. She's a Harvard-educated lawyer. She was recognized as one of the top 5% of all federal executives with the Presidential Rank Award. And she founded the mediation program at the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, where she served as general counsel. And Judith held a number of very high-ranking positions with different federal agencies through her career, but she recently retired in January of this year from her positions with the government and opened her own private practice in Florida, where she's currently practicing. So shortly after you retired and opened your own practice, Judith, COVID hit and online mediation hit, and you pretty seamlessly segued over. I mean, you didn't really seem to show much of a stumble in your practice. So how do you think it's gone for you?
Well, I was fortunate in that through the mediation committee, I was very used to doing Zoom meetings, as you know, and I had a really good example of an online mediator in you in front of me. So I realized pretty fast that I had always been planning on doing some online mediation, that the time was now. That was furthered by what was going on here in the courts in Florida, where the courts had to close in the spring. And they started to reopen just virtually after a few months of putting together a plan. And so they changed some of their procedures so that the mediation program could get up and running. And initially, they had asked mediators if we would volunteer not only our time but our Zoom accounts. And now some of them are able to let mediators without Zoom accounts into the court ones, but it's obviously a little bit more complicated that way. So I volunteered to use my Zoom account to do online mediations in the county courts and small claims courts and the Citizens Dispute Settlement Program here in the 12th Judicial Circuit in Florida, which is Manatee County, Sarasota County, and DeSoto County.
Yeah, and you really like jumped in. I mean, I think it was back in March where you actually got online and started doing mediations for the courts. And you actually, I think, really kind of helped the courts set up how this should all work. I know we've talked at times and you were, letting them know some of the issues around maybe email addresses for some of the participants. Maybe they don't have them, and how were e-signatures going to work. So I think it's you were one of those participants who wasn't just helping out by doing the pro bono mediations. You were actually helping the courts even just set this up.
Well, as I was finding things out, and Murphy's Law is alive and well when you're trying to do online mediations or online court anything for that matter. And so I did try to not only let the courts know what I was finding and sending in, some suggestions, but also try to work with the mediation community here and share information about how to do things. So um, I've actually even done a continuing mediation course here already and have been sending around information about things that I'm finding, as well as my monthly Zoom tips that I've been doing for our mediation committee newsletter. One of the things I'm finding out is it really has been a trial by fire because we do so many mediations when you decide to do it for the court. You can we're volunteers. We're doing this pro bono, and you can pick to just to do a morning or just to do an afternoon. But the courts really needed help, so what I agreed to do was basically dedicate a day to each of the two counties that are really active in the mediation program. Manatee, where I live, and Sarasota, which is just next door. So that can be anywhere from 5 to 7 mediations a day, and some of those will continue, and you'll pick them up later. But you're going pretty quickly. It's a lot of cases. Some people are represented by counsel. Some people are not. You may have a case where both parties are pro se. You may have a case where both parties have lawyers, or you may have a case where one party has a lawyer and one party doesn't, and where they have very different levels of technology. So somebody may come in through a computer and have a microphone and good cameras and access to all the apps you can think of, and somebody may come in through a very simple telephone, and then it's just like a conference call, and they have none of the ability that you would have when you're coming in through Zoom. A lot of people don't even understand that if they do have a smartphone, that they need to download the Zoom app if they want to be able to do everything. And so you
Right.
can wind up having people on a call because you don't really get to talk to them beforehand. And they've come in and they can't share the screen with you. They can't see a chat. So if you're trying to send notices because things are running late or one of the parties hasn't shown up yet, you can't do that. So there are just a lot of issues with people coming in to a Zoom meeting with different levels of access and trying to sort of level the playing field and first of all see whether you can get people in to come back in if they can, download the app and come in if you're really going to be doing some drafting. Or if not, just figure out ways to kind of even things out. So I did a mediation. It was an adjourned mediation. So we had an hour, then we had another 2 hours on Friday, and somebody came in just through their phone and not with an app, not through the app. They just went boom, and so they couldn't share the screen or anything. So I pointed that out, so they went back out, downloaded the app, came back in because we needed to draft a document. But people don't always think about that, and even sophisticated people, if they are on the road or they're really busy, they might just pick up their phone and come in and not realize that if you want to use the full functionality of Zoom, you need to come in through the application. You will not be able to do everything if you don't. If you've got a smartphone, just because you've got a smartphone, it's not going to work. It's not going to
It's
do
still
everything
just a phone call,
if you
right?
don't come in through the app. If you come in through the app on your phone, then you can do everything.
Right.
You can share the screen, you can chat, you can look at everybody, they can look at you, et cetera, et cetera. But if you don't, you're severely handicapped. And so, and sometimes people don't want to do it or they're not comfortable downloading apps or they're worried about it. And some people, have very, very simple phones, particularly in a debt collection case where someone comes in, they've only got a phone. They may not even have email. And then you
Right.
really have to think about, okay, here's this person on the screen with me doing everything who's a lawyer who represents a debt, a creditor who is trying to collect, you know, $8,000 from somebody who doesn't have it, and they've got to try and negotiate something, and the other person is on the phone, and it's just like a phone call for them. They can't see anything, they can't see you, they can't look at the document, and so I've got to figure out ways to make sure that if we're looking at documents, I'm reading them carefully, I'm reading them slowly, I'm asking, for feedback constantly to make sure that the person understands what we're doing, and that we've got ways to be able to execute documents as well. So it can be very, very challenging when you have people with unequal technology.
Yeah, well, and I think that's something, if you're doing private mediations for paying private clients, most of the time we have the opportunity to educate people about the technology needs, about the fact that they're going to need the app, they're going to need the program, this is how screen sharing works, and walk them through. But I think it's really interesting, when people are coming in through the court system, that the education perhaps doesn't extend that far. And then the mediator, you in this particular case, is the one on the fly who has to sort of figure out how to deal with these issues, and help the people. I mean, you're really talking about a situation that has the potential for inequity, or perhaps unconscious bias, or just issues around, one side who's all technologically savvy and another side who has technology deficits, whether it's, in their savvy or if it's in their ability to access the technology. But I've talked about in other episodes where that can create, either an unconscious bias or just, an issue where someone's feeling that they're not getting the equal attention of the mediator, or they're not understanding. So I heard you saying that what you're doing with an agreement is that you read it out loud to them. Do you slowly, and then stop along the way to make sure they've understood that section that you've just read?
Yes.
Yeah,
So
and you find that can, I mean, I can imagine with a shorter document that can be helpful. And probably most of the agreements that you're coming to, say in small claims or something like that, aren't particularly long.
no, they're all pretty short. I mean, basically, the way that the mediation program here works is that the county provides mediation for free in small claims and for $60 a person in county civil cases up to $15,000 in controversy. When you get above that, the parties have to get their own mediator. So, it's a fairly broad spectrum. But the other thing I would say about sort of inequality is you may have parties that are economically equal, but here in Florida we have a lot of retired people, and they may have a very nice computer system and they don't know how to use that. And so sometimes you also need to work in the time to make sure that you can tell people, this button on your screen and then that one, and you go here, and I'll just say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to hit share screen. You're going to see my screen. I'm going to ask you if you see my screen. Do you see my screen? We're going to do this. And I walk them through everything I do, including, when I get to e-signatures. And I should talk about that as well. Something that I think is really important to have to replicate the in-person experience is to also have some form of e-signatures. And as people have email so that you can send them something, they're okay, which is most of the time. I would say I've had a few cases that didn't, and we've had to work around that. But I think that it's really helpful, and it can also really level the playing field. Also, if you have someone who's represented and someone who's not, and everybody gets to see the document, discuss the document with me there to mediate and discuss any issues that they have, and then I can get it to everybody and they can sign it and we're done.
Right.
And it's all being done in this, non-adversarial situation where there's somebody that can explain things and help them talk to each other. If you don't do that, then you may have, counsel pushing something on the unrepresented person who may not understand the import of it, may not feel comfortable, and things can go south. So I find that it works a lot better with these court cases to try to work out everything, including the language of the agreement, and get everybody to actually sign it right there. If they're not ready to, that's fine. And the other thing that I'm very careful to tell unrepresented people that they always have a right to a lawyer. And, if they want to go and find one and they want to consult one, they should always tell us. They should never feel that they don't understand what's going on, or that they're in over their head. Self-determination is a very important aspect of mediation in Florida, probably everywhere, but I would say it's probably the number one principle for mediation here. So I do try to be really, really careful with that.
Well, and yeah, I mean, I think that's so important because especially people can become intimidated in the process. And when there's that additional technology layer, and if people are not comfortable with the technology, they may be feeling disadvantaged in addition to just the court process or the mediation process, then the technology and their, non-understanding of how everything works. I love that you say that you actually just describe each thing that you're doing so I'm going to click on the icon for screen share, and that's going to bring, I love that because what you're adding is a verbal visual layer almost, right? You're taking what you're doing in actuality, but making it a verbal walkthrough for them so that everything can be more easily understood. So even if someone were on the phone, it strikes me that if you're saying, well, right now what I'm doing is screen sharing, I know you can't see the screen, but what we have on here is the document, and I'm going to read that to you now. So we'll go through it paragraph by paragraph or something like that. That's a great way to at least add a level of, I'm going to call it the visual in my little hashtags. But I know you have a favorite e-signature program or app that you're using. What's the one that you use?
Well, I'm using Pandadoc, and I'm using it quite frankly because it's free.
Free is
um,
good.
yeah, although if you go to their website, you won't know that automatically. So you kind of have to click on signature tools. Otherwise, you might think that you have to pay. But what you have to pay for is a whole bunch of other things that they do. This is kind of how they draw you into, they do bills and contracts and all sorts of other things. So they do a really good office suite for people that are engaged in, more kind of product work, I think, product sales. But I'm very happy with this. It took me a while to get really proficient with it and get faster. But the people that are in my cases, they really like it. I mean, it's so easy for them. I say, this is going to be really easy for you. You're going to see this. It's going to come. You're going to do that. I said, and the second that you sign it, it's going to show up on my screen and I'll show it to you. And everyone thinks that's really cool. And it actually
Yeah.
is pretty cool because you're just sitting there and all of a sudden, your document gets filled in with signatures and dates, which is, so that's been very good for the court and it's really helped them. But I guess I should talk a little bit about, glitches and how I have been trying to overcome them. One of the things about doing what I call speed dating of mediation is, if you're doing 7 mediations in a day or something like that, you have to have all sorts of backup because all sorts of things can happen. Back in July, our internet service provider had a bad outage, in the middle of the afternoon, and I got frozen out of a mediation. It was
Right.
really awful. And, I couldn't use Wi-Fi, obviously. My Wi-Fi was also coming from them, so I couldn't do that. So what I did is I always have my cell phone in the room with me, just in case anything happens. So I turn off the Wi-Fi, get onto the cellular, go to my Zoom app, and open my meeting again. And I was able to do that, and it was pretty seamless. I mean, everybody saw me frozen for a minute, and then I came right on, and we were able to complete the mediation. And I had to do my next mediation from my phone because
Sure.
they didn't finish until fixing the internet until like 7 o'clock. But I was able to get every single one done. So what I did is I have a virtual mediation process that I drafted up, and I added, to that, make sure that you have your cell phone on cellular, so you don't even have to waste that time turning off Wi-Fi, just be ready. And it's also part of the spiel. So when I start a mediation, I make sure that I have current email addresses for everybody, um, not just for getting a hold and phone numbers,
That's what
not
I was
just
going
for
to
getting a
say.
hold of
Yeah.
them, but also when if we do get to an agreement, I need their email addresses. That's the first thing that I have to put into my e-signature document. So I make sure that I get all of that. And I explain to everybody, what to do if they get disconnected and how to get in and have them email me if there's going to be an issue. I give everybody my professional email address, Judith at adrworkout.com, so that if there is an issue, which sometimes there is, they can let me know. I explain to them, that if I have an issue, I will come back in and what to expect so that everyone is completely ready. So we just spend a couple of minutes going over all of the technology issues so that everybody is ready. Most of the time you don't need it, but sometimes you really do. And, during storm season, we had a lot of thunderstorms in the summer, and, some people had unstable connections at various points where they were.
Oh yeah. I mean, I actually did a whole episode on how a mediator's opening statement might change for an online mediation. Not that you wouldn't say all the things you normally say, but there's much that you would want to add, just as you pointed out, right? You want to have a protocol for if there's a technology failure. You want to let people know ahead of time, because then there's not the panic, right? That people seem to, if the screen just goes out and they don't know what to do, then everybody gets all panicky. So I love that you said that, because all the things that you point out, I think, are very important. You
Mm.
need to let them know it might happen. You need to have everybody's emails. I always make sure I have cell phones and that they have mine, and what they should do. Try to sign back on. And people forget that you can do a mediation from your phone. It is not ideal,
No, it is
but
not.
it's not, but it's better, honestly, than for me anyway, a telephonic where
Mhm.
you're just calling in on a hard line or not using the visual. At least on a screen, even on a phone, you can see people, you can share documents, you can do pretty much everything that you can do, although you can't use breakout rooms,
Yeah,
which
and some people just live on their phones. I mean, I've
yeah,
had lawyers that live on their phones, and they
yep,
are smart. So they've got the app downloaded, but they just live on their phones, and that's how they want to do everything,
yep.
and that's what they do. And what can you do? The other thing should mention is the firewall issue with e-signature is that some law firms, have firewalls that are, dealing with things that they think look like spam, and some of them will pick up your e-signature document. So I had this happen with two different firms, and they didn't have time to deal with their firewalls. I suggested that they do that,
Right,
but in the meantime, what I ended up doing was getting their personal emails,
right. So you
sending
can
it to
send it
their
to them
personal accounts
separately.
because the lawyers had signature authority and they were signing for their client. And so
Yeah.
we had to do that. We had to redo the document with a different signature. So that's something else to be on the lookout for is firewalls, because some firewalls will just will do that. I mean, I remember when I was in the federal government, initially the firewall was killing Zoom invitations. I mean, they're not
Oh,
allowed.
really?
Yeah, they're not allowed to use Zoom themselves, but we were allowed to join Zoom meetings from the browser. But the first few times, our
Right.
firewall was kicking it out, and I had to work with our IT department to take care of that. So that, if you're dealing with firms that really maintain a sturdy firewall, they may need to whitelist your application if they're not familiar with it. So that's another thing to think about.
That's a good point. I haven't run into that. I use DocuSign, so I
Mhm.
haven't run into a lot of issues with it, but that is a good point, because I have had it happen. And certainly I do remember, now that you bring it up, the days when some law firms or sites, you couldn't even send a Zoom, they couldn't use Zoom. They couldn't,
Yeah.
it was before COVID, but that happened quite often. So one other thing that you did a tip on for the mediation committee in our newsletter, and it was one that I thought was really well thought out, and a common issue for people, is preserving confidentiality when screen sharing. Some tips around that.
Oh yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
because
people
that's a
forget
biggie. Yeah,
sometimes. I think that everything that you have open is going to show up when you hit share screen. So if you've been working on something, and I might add also, if you've got your electronic signature software up and it's got like some of the names of the documents there, you know, it'll all show up, and you certainly don't want to do that. So when I get my meeting started, part of my list of to dos, along with along with all getting my phone ready, et cetera, is I actually go into share screen to double check what's actually closed and what's not, and then go back and make sure that I've closed everything. So every time I do a settlement document and run it through my electronic software, then I close everything out, go back to the screen where I can just drop a document in so that it's blank. And
right.
I actually have a file in my documents folder. I have a sub file called Zoom Docs where I have all my templates, and that I'll keep open because it's just templates. And that way, when I share screen, I've got all my templates in there that I can use, and it's a very small sub file. It's got like 6 things in it, and that's it. So I have that open, and I have my it's it's web-based, so, I have Pandadoc open as well, but I have it open clean with nothing that you can see so that nobody can see anything.
Right.
I don't know how many meetings I've been to where people forget that when they share the screen and they've got like their entire email.
Yes,
in-
it's
in
the
there.
email that I see all the
Yeah, and you
time.
see it's like, oh my God, you never want to do that. And it's just one of those things, if you make it part of your, like I have my virtual mediation procedures, just go check, 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 and do it, then, because you want it to be available easily. It looks unprofessional to be groping around, but you certainly, it looks even worse to not maintain confidentiality. So you want to do both of those things.
Yeah, I think one of the things, there's a couple things. I use my large iPad. I use my iPad Pro, and I actually open documents on there and then just share that screen because you have more control. But Zoom actually announced at Zoomtopia, as I talked about in an episode just a little while ago, they're going to have Zaps coming up, which are Zoom apps, which are integrated apps, and several of the integrated apps will be Dropbox or Box or some of the document retention platforms, secure document retention platforms, so that you'll have it as an app directly on your toolbar, which I think will help to start taking care of that problem. But you're right, because I go into mediations day in and day out where someone was just working on a settlement agreement for one case and it's still open on their computer. So when they open up a Word doc to work on the document for this mediation, that one's there. And that's really, I think we all know that that's a big no-no. So another thing I definitely want to talk about, something that you were saying you were going to be integrating into your multi-party mediations, and that's polling. Because I don't think a lot of mediators will have considered polling and the uses that we might be able to have for that. I know you used it recently in one of the happy hour that you hosted for Mediation Week last week. And most people think of polling as something we do in meetings or presentations. But I'd love to hear your tips first off around polling, but also your thoughts on its use in a multi-party mediation.
Because I'm actually starting to use it in my consulting practice, because I also have a consulting practice in looking at systems and things like that. And I'm working on a federal contract right now to look at ADR practices across agencies and identify best practices, and there'll be a big report that comes out, which will be publicly available, which I will put on my
Oh,
website
we'll have
so
you back
everybody
on
can
the
see it.
show. Yeah.
And it'll be different because the federal government doesn't use Zoom.
Well, right.
It is going to be very informative, I think, because we'll be seeing a whole different way of doing things. But so I found that polling can sometimes cut through a lot of time if you've got multiple people, either because you're doing a consulting gig or because you've got multi-party mediation and there are a couple of things that you just need to get out of the way. Instead of starting up a conversation which could then, spiral off with everything, just give people choices and let them pick them really fast, depending on what it is. It's really basic stuff for the objective things about, how people want to proceed in a mediation, or what documents they want to use, or, what order they want to address things in, or that sort of thing. You can do it, and you can do the poll two ways. You can do a multiple choice poll where you give them a bunch of different choices, or you can just do if it's just an on off switch and you want to quickly get everybody to focus on it without having a long discussion, this or that, that's all they need to do. Yes, no. And, hopefully you can get there. But if you got a bunch of people and a bunch of parties and, you want to just get a few foundational issues resolved, generally processed, then I think that can be something that is pretty useful. And so I'm planning on using it in cases where the insurance company is there as well. We have these kinds of cases where, that's where it can be important to see, who wants to talk, who's going to be doing the talking, what's the order we're going to do, what's the order of the issues we're going to address, and just give them, if there are a couple things where I want to empower people on process, maybe there's 3 things on process that I would like them to decide rather than me saying this is the process. Just go 1, 2, 3 like that. So the one thing to remember about polling, here's the technical stuff,
Yeah.
is you need to actually schedule your meeting to activate it. If you just go into if you just start a meeting and you want to try and activate it, it won't work. So what you do is you schedule your meeting, and then you can go into your meeting and start at any time before the start date. I know you know that. Lots of my fellow mediators didn't know that when I was explaining this to them recently. And then you can go in and you can put your polls together so that they're there. And then when you do have your meeting, they're all there, and you can just go right into your polling button and launch your polls whenever you want to. And it's a very handy little tool to have, I think, sometimes. And I think people, sometimes like it as well. It's not a bad way to start a mediation, to let people immediately make some decisions and be able to make them quickly. Let's just vote on this. 1, 2, 3. And so that's just something that I'm instituting.
Well, and I like it. And you can also share the results on the screen so that everybody can see them very quickly after they've all voted. So I had not, I'll be honest, thought about using it in a mediation, but I can see the application there, and I can actually see where that will make things easier. Clearly, you're not going to put out there, I think, substantive questions where you're doing a poll on it, but there's a level of asynchronous communication there where you can put these things out, and I know they're doing them at the same time, but it allows people to sort of, really cut to the chase on some objective issues. I think it's a great idea. I'd love to hear from other listeners if they've implemented any type of polling into their mediations. I'd love to hear about it, because I think that's a way where you're actually taking the technology and stepping up what you do in person to, use the technology that's available to us to add new layers to what we're doing for people. And that's one thing you referenced earlier, sort of taking what we do in person and replicating it online. But we actually can go further than that. And that's what you're doing there. You're actually taking the technology and using it to implement something brand new into the process to help
Well, I
people.
think that is something that is really important for all of us to think about as the world continues to change. And I actually have a project with another mediator here, where what we're doing is we're thinking about what have we learned when we look at the online mediation process. What are we doing that's better than what we did in person? What are we doing that's worse? And how can the process, and there are just systemic things that we might not be able to change, but that we can make recommendations on. And so we decided a couple weeks ago that we really wanted to do this project, so we have started pulling together some things. And I've thrown a couple of things out already to the courts, but we're trying to do something much more comprehensive to say, in terms of access to justice. We started online mediation feeling very excited that this was something that could expand access to justice, because people could, from wherever they were, if they were in their offices or if they were home, they could just take some time off, get on their phone or get on their computer, and try to mediate things through. And we could create, all these different ways for them to participate, including, breakout rooms, which I think are, fantastic, and sharing screens and everything else. Um, but, there are obviously things that work worse. There are
Mhm.
things that work better. And so what we'd like to do is to be able to make up for the deficiencies, and then try to find ways to use the technology to make the system more accessible. Because I'm very excited about what the courts in Florida have done with their mediation program. I think it's one of the best in the country when I talk to people through the committee. I think that, they've got a good infrastructure for it, better than many states. They've put the resources in it. They have great training for everybody. They have resources like a mediation and ethics advisory council, just a lot of different resources. And so I think we have, the time is right to really take that next step and to make the mediation system much more accessible to people that it's still not that accessible.
Yeah. Well, and I do think, the online platform was a quick pivot for most. Many people and court systems have implemented now technology into the system. But yeah, I think that's a wonderful point. There are really good aspects to it. There are some that don't work as well. That doesn't mean it should be thrown out or discounted. Maybe it's beyond COVID. Maybe what works well for certain types of mediation should stay online, and maybe certain types of mediations or other dispute resolution proceedings need to be offline. But the point is to take what's available to us and make the best of it and use it to its best ability. And that takes the constant adjusting and thinking and being creative that you've just shown you've been doing in this episode, because you've come up with what I'll call the end arounds around all the issues, best practices, and just things that still make or help to make the process so accessible to people and still work. So for the past 6-7 months, people have been able to resolve their issues with you, not just sit and wait until the courts open back up. So I want to make sure that everyone, because although you do a great deal of pro bono work, you also have your private practice, and you mentioned that you also do consulting. So tell people how they can get in touch with you and reach out to you for more information.
Sure. My website is adrworkout.com, and my email is judith@adrworkout.com, and you can see the mediation services, the arbitration services, and the consulting services that I offer. And I am always really interested in, particularly in consulting, looking at systems, since that was something that I did, for many years as a general counsel and chief counsel. It's trying to develop systems that would work for resolving disputes, and successfully did that. So I'm excited that I'm working on a report with two law professors for the Administrative Conference of the U.S. to really advertise, what works in the federal government, and, what are the gold standards for everybody there and elsewhere. So I'm looking forward to coming out with this report, but I am also looking forward to, taking dives at other systems across the country. And now that I am 100% virtual, just like Susan,
Yeah.
I am available to take on engagements anywhere in the country or the world.
Right? It's welcome to the online world. So I will put all of your contact information, the website, and all in the show notes for people so they can reach out to you through that. But Judith, thank you so much for coming on and sharing, that practical advice that you have really been creative. I love hearing these stories. And I know that your Zoom tip of the month is very popular with our mediation committee. So again, I just want to remind everyone, come join us with the mediation committee, the American Bar Association section of dispute resolution. We're very active there. You can join it. It's americanbar.org/membership. I'll put that in the notes as well. And Judith and I would love to see you at one of our committee meetings on the second Wednesday of each month at 12 noon. So Judith,
Yes,
again,
we
thank you
would.
so much. Yes, right? The more the merrier. We have a very good group of professionals and colleagues. It's always a really interesting meeting. By the way, and I'm going to put a link to this as well in the notes, Judith presented a wonderful program, Bankruptcy, What Mediators Need to Know. And it was really well received. People there's just bankruptcies, the flood's just about to come. I know it's already starting, but it's really going to go deep. And Judith did a shorter program for us in the mediation committee, but you also on your Zoom, on your YouTube channel have a longer version. So I can, is it all right if I put a link to that in the show
Yes, I did a big training program for the 12th Judicial Circuit mediators, because we're starting to see these cases, and we're going to be seeing a lot more. And so is
Okay.
everyone else.
So if you want to see that, and you do, I'll put a link to Judith's 2 presentations in the show notes as well. So thanks so much, Judith.
You're so welcome.